Okay, so as the official Goonie Wrangler, who was the Goonie who was hardest to wrangle?
Oh, I don't want to name names because that would be indiscreet, Sean Astin. But
Why was he so hard to wrangle?
because you give him a little sugar, and he's off like a rocket.
From the heart of Hollywood, it's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show with Patrick Labyorteaux.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show. Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Tonight's episode, Mark Marshall.
Patrick Labyorteaux Show. He's the one you gotta know.
Okay, guys, this is really, really cool. This guy has worked on some of the most popular movies of all time, such as The Goonies, The Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Color Purple, Lethal Weapon 3, Free Willy, Harry Potter, and of course, The Goonies. He was the official Goonie Wrangler. Please welcome Mark Marshall.
Hey,
Hey,
Patrick,
Mark.
how are
you
you?
doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, man, I am doing good. Just to keep everybody up to date. So I'm going to ask you again. I just spoke with you a little while ago. We've known each other since the 80s, at least, I think. Do you remember how we met?
I think it was through our mutual friend Jim Michaels.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So Jim
was-
Michaels is a producer in Hollywood. He was a producer on my brother's show, Whiz Kids, which
Right.
shot kind of all around, but like at Warner Brothers mainly. And we were shooting at Universal. And you were based kind of at Universal, kind of.
Yeah, Amblin was on the Universal lot.
Right.
And I was there till '88.
So we've known each other since the 80s, and we'll tell the story later when I came to visit you at Amblin. But you have written a book that is amazing. Obviously, it recounts your experiences in Hollywood, and I want to kind of go over that with you because the amount of projects that you have been involved in that are literally legendary is kind of astounding. But let's start at the beginning. Act 1, Beginnings. As you say in the book, the beginning is the best place to start, or how does that go?
Yeah, it's always best to start at the beginning. That's what the good witch told Dorothy.
It's always best to start at the beginning. So how did you get to Hollywood? What's your secret origin?
Oh man, well, it was a series of events. I got interested in film in high school. With two friends and I started a company called NBC Productions, and we made these little short comedies. And I actually had a career set on music because I got a voice scholarship to a local university, and I thought that would be my career. And then my father died when I was 19, and I had kind of hit a crossroads. And I happened to be thumbing through a copy of American Film Magazine one day and saw an ad for a summer course between USC and Universal Studios. It was open to 50 people, from all walks of life. And so I applied thinking I'll never get in. And I
Right.
did. I got the letter in April of 77 and went out to LA to attend USC for the summer. And met a producer who came to speak to our class one day, a producer named Howard Kazanjian. And at the end
I
of the
know
class,
Howard.
yeah, a girl raised her hand. Oh, yeah, that's right, because he produced the first season of JAG.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a girl raised her hand and asked how we could visit sets while we were there. And Howard said, well, come talk to me after class. And amazingly, she and I were the only two that approached Howard. And he would write us
Wow.
passes on our days off. And we would go visit the sets, Rockford Files and Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries and Quincy and, all those shows. And at the end of each day, we would, tell Howard what we'd learned. And when the summer ended, I was on my way back to Oklahoma, but I asked Howard if I could keep in touch. And he said, sure. So I did. And then in January of 78, decided I needed to move out to LA if I really wanted to be in the business, and called Howard every week about a job. And as my friend George Campbell says, there's a fine line between persistence and stalking. So I tried to be persistent but just respectful. And sure enough, after 8 months of calling Howard, he had an opening for a film runner on a project he was producing for George, More American Graffiti. And I got a job.
George is George Lucas for those of us not on the first name basis.
The Emperor. That's really where it started.
That is like, an actor's version of your story is, I always wanted to be on Broadway and in the movies. And so I drove to New York City and I was discovered at the bus terminal and then I starred in a play. So it's like, it's kind of an amazing story. My wife, Tina, and she has this thing where she says luck, timing, and geography, that you always need those three things. And the one thing that's not in those things, and the one thing that I've noticed that is completely consistent with everybody who has success, is a drive to actually make that happen. Yes, luck, timing, and geography. Yeah, Lana Turner was discovered at Schwab's, but she looked like Lana Turner. It's not like there's going to be, and she was at Schwab. She was in Hollywood. She was trying to be something. Your persistence in connecting with, Howard Kazanjian, I think I see it repeated because the book that you wrote is amazing. And as I'm reading it, I see that while you present your opportunities and experiences as from the eyes of someone who is like enamored with the business and loves the business and like can't believe that they're there, that's the POV that you have, which is delightful. But there's no missing the fact that you worked really, really hard to get, once you had an opportunity, to make those opportunities happen. And from what I can see, you never really turned down any opportunity that was offered you, right? I mean, hard work was never something that you were like objecting to.
Well, not at all. It was a different time too, but thank you. I would add one ingredient to your wife's list, and that would be naivete. I was I was from the Midwest, or from Oklahoma, and we were raised, yes sir, no ma'am, and you always held the door open for people, and those qualities that were instilled in me, I took with me, and so there was something about being able to utilize those that, I don't know, maybe made an impression on people, or they knew that that I wasn't going to try to, skirt my duties or anything else. And I genuinely wanted to do everything and know everything. So I think that's why I was always saying yes, because I wanted to know it all. I fell short.
Well, I think you said it. Well, I mean, no one knows it all, thank God. But you said it right there, that genuinely wanted to do it. You have a genuineness that I think people respond to, because it can be lacking in some people in Hollywood. It's really popular right now to diss on Hollywood and Hollywood types and everything like that. But what I think people, and you understand it, what I think people don't understand is Hollywood, 99% of it is made up of real people who are going to work and working and trying to do the best job that they can do. 1% of it is super huge stardom and famous actors and famous directors. And then like 99% of that 1% are people who are also, while they're famous, they also really want to do good work. It's like 1% of 1% of 1% of bad apples and bad actors that just kind of like spoil the rest of it. For the most part, every crew that I've worked with, all the people in production are fantastic.
I agree.
I'm sorry, I had that axe to grind. So I want to, in the book, you have a lot of ins and outs of Hollywood, which is really very exciting. But let's kind of streamline that, because it happens pretty quick. So you come out here to work for Howard. And where was Howard working at that time? Was this Howard, at CPI?
No, he was before.
What was the commercial place you worked at with Tex Avery?
Oh, CPC Associates.
CPC. Okay, so is that kind of in that area?
Well, no, that was down in the heart of Hollywood, and actually was started by a guy named Roy Seawright, who was an optical cameraman who did work on the Laurel and Hardy shorts, and so I went to work when his son took over as a PA, and that's so that was my very first job, and that was actually a chance encounter too, because I had gone to a seminar put on by Industrial Light and Magic at I don't know if you remember Sherwood Oaks Experimental College, but it was yeah, it was a great concept, and with professionals teaching courses on their specialty, and I took a cinematography class.
I took a screenwriting class there.
With who taught it? Do you remember?
I wish I could remember. He was a very aggressive screenwriter who was not successful, but successful enough to teach there and taught me a lot. But I can't remember his name. Yeah.
Well, I took a cinematography class taught by a guy named Michelle Hugo, and I heard about this ILM seminar, and so I did that, and met some guys who worked at CPC, and just fell into conversation with them, and they said, well, you should come by and see our place. And so I went by, and they hired me for the day, which turned into 2 days, which turned into 2 weeks. And it wasn't until I got the call from Howard about the job opening on More American Graffiti that I left CPC with their blessing and moved over to these temporary trailers on Lancashire Boulevard, right across from the opening of the Universal Tour. They were refurbishing the Egg Company at the time, which became the Southern Division of Lucasfilm. And Howard worked out of these temporary trailers with us and then moved over with us.
It's amazing to me. Sometimes it's more difficult to interview a person that you know so well, like I know you, because there's so many stories that fly through. I can't keep a straight trajectory. So you come out to Hollywood. It's at this commercial facility. Was this where you started? Where was the actual first? Let's kind of try to keep it linear. You came out to Hollywood, and while you were waiting for Howard to respond to you, you were working at this commercial facility,
right? Who
also happened to have Tex Avery just hanging out drawing cartoons.
Yes.
Who, if you don't know who Tex Avery is, how do you not know who Tex Avery is? He created all the Looney Tunes at Warner Brothers. I mean, Roadrunner and all these great cartoons, and he was just hanging out there.
Yeah, Tex was retired, and he was friends with the staff there, especially with a guy named Ted Eckleberry, who was the editor. And so Tex would sit on a couch and would sketch all day, because he was hired by, I think it was CBS, to do filler pieces for the Popeye and Ludo Hour or something. It was Popeye Hour. And, Tex would draw these perfect frames, the perfect joke, and then he would perform them for us as a group, and he would do the sound effects, the music, everything. And he was a genius. He's the one who created the whole style. The wolf whose eyes bug out and tongue rolls out on the floor, and that's kind of who Tex was. Kind of those characters. He was Bugs Bunny. He was Daffy Duck. Aspects of his characters were him. And so, but unfortunately, CBS, who at the time before IMDb didn't bother to find out who Tex was, and they let him go because they said he didn't really know comedy. And that was devastating for Tex. But he took it in stride.
Who's this Lucy Ricardo chick we've got working for us? Get me someone who knows comedy.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't get away with, well, people will still do that today. You wouldn't get away with it because of IMDb,
Right.
It was sad, but Tex was such a sweet man. He had this kind of rough exterior, but underneath he was such a sweetheart. And when I left, he I would go back to visit once in a while, and he would call me Big Daddy. Hey, Big Daddy. and then we lost Tex in 1980.
Well, I mean, what a legend. You arrive in Hollywood, you're hanging out with this legend. Now you go to work for Howard, and Howard Kazanjian, like you said, produced the first season of JAG. I also met Howard in a story that flashes forward. I interviewed him for a documentary I was doing at the premiere of Return of the Jedi, where I was basically waiting in line for Return of the Jedi, and I saw Howard Kazanjian, and because super Star Wars fans know all the producers, I ran up to him and I interviewed him with my video camera. And so that's where we first met, over at the Egyptian down here on Hollywood. Yeah. But so you start work with Howard over at this grouping of trailers, which there was this old, they call it the egg company. I'm assuming it was an old egg company that they revitalized this building for, like you said, Lucasfilm South. It's hard to explain if you hadn't seen it, how honestly beautiful this place was. It was like old brick with like vines growing all over it, thick, dark wood. It was gorgeous. It's now the metro station. They tore it down.
Yeah.
But during the time that you were there, kind of walk us through, what was your experience? So you start working with Howard, doing what? You're working on More American Graffiti, which is a Lucasfilm production, because he made American Graffiti for Universal. Mm-hmm. Then he wrote a thing called The Star Wars, which Universal says, nah. And so he took that to 20th. And then American Graffiti was this huge hit. And so they said, let's do a sequel. And so he was busy doing, I think, Star Wars, right? So he had a couple other folks, Willard and Gloria Hayek, do the sequel to for that.
Actually, no, they did the first one, and then because George was kind of in prep for Empire Strikes Back, he kind of abdicated the choosing of the writer director for Graffiti to Howard, and he found a guy named Bill Norton. Officially was BWL Norton, and so he turned in a draft. George liked it and greenlit it, and that's what they shot. So, but yeah, Howard was working out of the trailers, but they ended up shooting up in Central California. So I was kind of far away from the action.
But there is one quote. I want to read this quote, and I want you to explain it. This is from your book. No, I have it here. I have the quote here. So please explain this quote from the book. I roamed the city for the next few hours a wanted man, imagining being labeled a terrorist, sent to a supermax prison, and missing the film's premiere. I decided to spend my last few hours of freedom downing a malt at Bob's Big Boy in Burbank.
Yeah, that was my first experience in film production. I was called one morning by the production office and told to go to Stembridge Farms at Paramount, and you remember Stembridge Farms because you did Little House at Paramount, and pick up some blank ammo. So I went down and got it, and they boxed it up for me. And at the time, PSA Airlines had a route that went all through southern, central, and northern California, and they had a thing called the Instapack service, which you could put packages on the plane and send it to your destination. And
now, just before you continue, so this was for More American Graffiti.
Yeah,
they had scenes in Vietnam, and they were shooting those scenes in Vietnam in Northern California.
Yeah,
but they needed Terry the Toad. So they needed the ammunition to be sent to the production, like all the fake ammo. And so that's what you had. Okay.
Yeah. So, but before I shipped it, the unit production manager said to label the shipment as auto parts. Now, like I said, I was kind of naive and not the brightest, bulb in the shed, but I said, well, wait a minute, they x-ray these packages. Oh no, we've done it before. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So I followed directions and labeled it auto parts and put it on the plane. And about an hour later, I was actually doing a run at Fox, because when I wasn't doing graffiti stuff, I was doing Star Wars stuff. I mean, deliveries and things like that. And I got a call or a page from the production office. So I called and they said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm just leaving Fox." "Oh, so the FBI hasn't gotten to you yet?" I said, "Why would the FBI be looking for me?" And then it hit me, that, oh yeah, auto parts, explosive auto parts. And I had to lay low until they worked it out, but it got the FBI involved. I couldn't believe it. And that was my first real experience. It leaves a mark, believe me.
Well, my favorite part of that, not only obviously that's a great story, but that you end up at Bob's Big Boy in Burbank, which is a classic. It's one of the last ones, and it's close to the airport, so that makes sense. And that's where David Lynch lived, practically. That's where that was his favorite place.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're working for Lucasfilm, and you casually mentioned Star Wars. Obviously, I'm the right age. I think you are too. I was a huge Star Wars fan. I was a member of the Star Wars fan club, of which I just found out reading your book was what you were doing while you were working at Lucasfilm. What were you doing for Star Wars at this point?
Well, mainly it was because the Lucasfilm South had the publishing, merchandising, legal, things like that. So there was always stuff to go places. But also the people at Lucasfilm plugged me in. I helped with merchandising. I kept the Star Wars vault in order, which was, one of every prop and R2D2 and 3PO costumes and Vader costume. And then Craig Miller, who became my mentor and was one of the publicists there, also was director of fan relations. So Craig, I don't know if I had indicated that I wanted to write something or whatever, but he gave me an opportunity to contribute to the Star Wars newsletter, which at the time had over 1 million subscribers. So it was a. Did you get your patch and everything? You got the kit.
Was it called Bantha Tracks, or was that something separate? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they wanted to call it Bantha Poodoo, but they decided on Bantha Track instead. And so that's kind of how I got involved in writing some of the articles and things, and they were great about giving me opportunities to do different things.
Well, it's amazing because it's hard I think most of the people watching this understand what it was like before the internet, but for those who don't, there was a massive fan reaction to the Star Wars films, of which if it happened today, you'd go online, there'd be a website, there'd be clips, there'd be 1,000 pieces of media for you to consume between movies. But at that time, it was just you, basically, literally you and this other guy kind of being the connection point to like what's coming up in what they called Star Wars 2. We didn't even have a name yet. Was it crazy on your end? Like it felt, because when you'd go to a theater, there'd be thousands of people just waiting around for the next, screening of Star Wars. It played in theaters for like what, a year and a half, 2 years?
At least a year, if not more, certainly, because we celebrated the first anniversary at a screening in North Hollywood at the UA on Victory Boulevard, and they did a costume contest. And in those days, there was really only the Don Post masks of 3PO and Vader, and I think Chewbacca. I'm not sure.
I think it was Chewbacca as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so most of the costumes were homemade, and they were amazing. These were the early fans that started building their costumes and things, and they were They really were extraordinary. Today you can buy, costumes that look exactly like the real thing, but no. So what was the question again?
Basically, it was a huge cultural event.
Yeah.
And just by the luck of numbers, Lucasfilm isn't a huge operation at that point. It's not owned. It's a personal company that George owns. He's got maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing, with the production and everything, a couple hundred people. But in the Lucasfilm offices where you were at, maybe 20 to 30 people. And so my question is, like, what was it? I mean, how was it? What was it like to be there at that time? It must have been huge.
Well, I got to tell you, because it was my first huge job, or working with a huge company like that, I was just trying to keep my head above water, and maybe you've experienced it too, where you go into a project and you just want to impress people and show that you can do the work, and you forget to really have a good time while you're doing it.
Right.
So that was, but no, there were periods where George would come down and stay for the day, and I ended up chaperoning Darth Vader on his local appearances. I ran R2-D2 one time for a television special, and those were. And then when Steven came to do Raiders, and did the auditions in the atrium there, those were times where you sit back for a moment and think, "Wow, this is pretty cool. This is history." But I was too young to really appreciate just how momentous it was. And I was such a small cog in the wheel, but it was a great vantage point to be able to see what was accomplished. By all
this
those
is
people.
really, this is super interesting, because you mentioned you would accompany Darth Vader and Boba Fett, and in the book you mentioned one particular thing for Special Olympics where a couple of the girls from Little House were there. I was also there. I remember getting pictures with Darth Vader and Boba Fett, and
were?
thinking, yeah, I was. I was freaking crazy for Star Wars, and I remember Boba Fett was new. They hadn't really. He had been in the Christmas special cartoon, but this was before Empire, and so it was kind of like, if you knew, you knew, but if you didn't know who this guy was. Don Belisario, who produced Jag, who worked with Howard Kazanjian, there's this great story that when you're doing Raiders, Tom Selleck was very, very close to being Indiana Jones. If not for Don Belisario, my former boss, saying, "Nah, he's going to be doing Magnum. Never mind, he can't do it." They wouldn't let him out of the contract or whatever to do Indy. So you're there, and you've got great pictures in your book of like Tim Matheson and all these guys reading for Indiana Jones. At that point, it was the next movie. Harrison wasn't connected. It was just Steven and George, which is saying a lot. But still, it's like, when you're looking at that, what were your thoughts about a movie like Raiders before it was Raiders, before it was anything?
Well, I got a chance to read the script early on. In fact, I think I still have the original script, and from that day, and it was a page turner. I mean, it was one of those things where you think, man, if they can put half of the visuals on the screen and half of the adventure and action, then it's going to be something. But it was, and then sitting in on when Tom Selleck was doing his, that audition is available on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try to find it and put it up here while we're talking about it.
Yeah, and it's also on the supplementary section of, I think, one of the DVD sets. A couple of those. And here's another Little House connection. Melissa Sue Anderson read for Marion.
Wow. That would have been, I don't know how old Karen Allen was. I think Karen Allen was perfect, and I love Melissa Sue. But Melissa Sue is super young compared to Karen Allen.
She was 18. I think she had turned 18, and I had a bit of a crush on her, so I made sure that I got to be the one to take her back to meet Steven. It was just amazing. And I didn't grow up on the serials or anything, so I didn't know about Naoki and the Tiger Men and some of those other great serials. But I thought man, this would be a great weekly series. And they ended up doing, wasn't there one called Tales of the Gold Monkey that they ended up,
which was Don Belisario. Yeah, they
really?
did 3 of them. Yeah, Don Belisario did Tales of the Gold Monkey, and that was with, I think, Stephen Collins. Then there was one on CBS called Bring 'Em Back Alive, starring Bruce Boxleitner, one of Melissa's ex-husbands. There was like 3 of them. Cliffhanger. They all did a rip-off version of it.
Yeah, so Donald Belisario ended up cashing in on Raiders.
He tried, yeah. He did just fine by Magnum, and he's created like Quantum Leap, and he worked on Battlestar, and he's done okay. JAG and CIS, he'll be fine.
Well, and everything worked out the way it was supposed to. Harrison ended up, as kind of an 11th hour replacement, made history. Tom Selleck became known as Magnum. Everything worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
When you're there at Lucasfilm, and I get it, you don't know what's going to hit, what's not going to hit, but what you do know for sure is when you're working in a company for George Lucas, George Lucas is a huge deal. In fact, at that time, George and Steven had kind of just created this huge summer blockbuster thing, which honestly didn't exist before. And of course, everyone knows Hitchcock, and everyone would know certain directors. But George and Steven in the 70s, at this moment, were kind of like rock stars for the very first time for directors. What was that like, having them just walking around the office asking you for coffee? What was that situation like?
Well, it's interesting because it was after I saw Star Wars with my brother at the North Point in San Francisco. My brother was attending seminary in Mill Valley. We went in to see Star Wars, and I came out and I said, I just want to meet George Lucas. And then after seeing Close Encounters, I said, I just want to meet Steven Spielberg. And so, for them both to be there, it was amazing. And I thought, well, I just, I'll just do stuff for Steven once in a while. But Frank Marshall, who was no relation, took me under his wing and treated me like his little brother. And one day he came to me and said, can you run a 35 millimeter projector? I said, absolutely. Well, I'd never run one before in my life. I'd done 16, but they were autothreads, And so Frank hired me as Steven's projectionist at home so that he could do research. He would run films for Norman Reynolds, the art director, and other people, and in research like James Bond movies, things like that. And so that's how I kind of got to know Steven. And
so I just got to know, when you go to Steven Spielberg's house, and do you bring the films from the studio, or do you go pick them up, or are they already there? Or
at that time they were already there. The studios would drop them off to the housekeepers, and they would put it into the projection.
And then he had a projection room just to watch movies, like before big screen TVs or anything. It was a real life, like, kind of movie theater?
Yeah, it was his living room. So the screen would come down in the living room, and then he had the projection room built. So, that's where I would go. And, I had to go through the house to get to the room, but,
right.
Yeah. So he was he loved running movies. That was his whole life,
So you're in the projection room. You're doing the movies. You have a very funny story about the first time you run. Could you just explain that story?
Yeah, Steven's going to find out about this one day. Steven's favorite movie was a guy named Joe, starring Spencer Tracy and Irene Dunn, which he ended up remaking.
Remade it as always. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
And so the MGM actually struck him a print off the original negative, and it was this pristine, beautiful print, and that was the first thing that I ran for him. And so I got in early and tried to look at how it would be threaded, and it was 2 projectors with a dowser, so you would be able to run continuously and not have to interrupt. That's what those changeover dots were for. And so I threaded up. Steven said, "Okay, let's run." And I turned it on, and there was this really bad clattering And so I turned it right off and said, "Sorry, Steven, I just need a second." And he was very nice. I went ahead and looked down. I turned on the light and looked down, and there was about 50 feet of the film, which had been split down the center. I had really threaded it up badly. So I snipped it off very quickly, rethreaded it, started it up. Fortunately, it was fine. Never had an accident like that again. And but that was
You must have lost your lunch. I mean, my gosh, that's got to be so I can't believe the pressure.
It is. Well, yeah, and the thing is, I tried not to think about it, but that's all I could think about after it happened.
Yeah.
Was it happening again and again and again, and Steven firing me, but fortunately, like I said, it never happened again. And then when I ran the daily rolls from Close Encounters production, when he was doing the special edition, he had me go up and run, and it was double system, and they're 10-minute rolls, so you're busy trying to get one projector threaded up while the other one's going, and then make sure you can finish and start on time. So it was there was a lot of pressure, but now I look on it very fondly.
So you're absolutely in the midst of literally the middle of it, and it is interesting in this business. Even though I said earlier, about the great thing about crews and everything, you can also be in front of someone and be completely invisible in the right way. In that you're projecting this film, Steven Spielberg's there. I would imagine sometimes he has friends over, and maybe these friends are very famous. And he was married to a very famous person at the time. And so you're in their home. There's all these famous people there. There's nothing shameful or wrong about, like, you're just there to run the pictures. And so it's not like you're there as a guest for them to hang out with and chat with. But were you able to listen in and hear, like, how these great filmmakers thought of these films? And was this an education type of thing for you? Or was it like you just had one thing to do and it was completely separate?
Well, the booth was soundproofed. So, of course, I couldn't hear anything going on. And I never would go out of the room into the room where they were, because that was their time, and I would have been an intruder. So I never really had a chance, at least with Steven. When I did it for Dick Donner, I had more of an opportunity, but with Steven, I would see the guests come in, like Penny Marshall would come in, and very analytically, I would think, now is that Laverne or Shirley? But otherwise, no, I kept it pretty separate.
So this is pretty spectacular. You're running movies at Steven Spielberg's house. You're working at Lucasfilm. When's the changeover happen from Lucasfilm to Amblin? Because Amblin is Steven's production company, Lucasfilm is George's production company, and then at some point you're working at both of them, but not at the same time.
Well, I was working at Lucasfilm during the day. I was working Steven's projectionist at night. And then in September of 80, I got fired because I had been doing the Darth Vader appearances, and when Vader would do his something in another state, I would just pack the trunk and ship it. And I packed the trunk for Cincinnati, and then got the call the day of saying, from the guy saying, "There's no breastplate here." And I know I had put it in, but it wasn't there. And so I don't know if it was just a knee-jerk reaction or if maybe they had planned it or not. But anyway, I got fired. And so...
man.
Yeah, that was devastating. And I thought, well, my career's over. And I ended up moving back to Oklahoma and working for an advertising firm, writing and producing radio and television commercials. So I kind of kept it, in the area. But on a trip out to LA in October of '83, I went to visit a friend of mine who was the receptionist at Amblin when it was at Warner Brothers. And she said, "Oh, Steven's not here today. He was supposed to be out of town. He didn't go out of town, but he's not coming in." And I said, "That's okay. I came to see you." And just as I said that, Steven comes walking down the walkway with his trainer, Jake Steinfeld. And he came in and said, what are you doing now? And I thought he meant at the moment. And I said, "Nothing really." And he said, "Well, look, Universal is building me a production compound, and I need a projectionist. You want to come back?" And I said, "Yeah." I mean, I think I said yeah before he even asked me. And then it turned out, after I moved back out to LA, that the projection job had to be union, and I wasn't
Gotcha.
union. So it was, "Oh, sorry." And, but
You've already moved.
yeah, again, I thought of the Wizard of Oz. Well, it looks like I'm coming a long way for nothing. But I helped him move from Warner Brothers to Universal, and they kept me on every day. And then finally, Steven said, "Look, I need someone in my office." And so he chose me to be his personal assistant.
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. And I'm very excited to announce that we have a brand new class called Adult Weekly Class. Now, what is that? Now, that's a class that'll meet every Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and you come in and you have an hour-long acting class with other students. It's very, very simple, very, very fun. So if you've ever wanted to be an actor or try it or just mess around, these classes are great. So the Adult Weekly Class is going to be every Wednesday at 5:30 Pacific. Now, come and check it out. It's going to be really fun. Go to workingactorschool.com. Check out the website. You can sign up for the class there. If you need any other information, there's a phone number and an email on the website. You can get it there. And we would love to have you come and try. Talk to you soon.
Act 2, Success.
So Steven Spielberg, huge director, star. He still is. It's not like I have to explain it. When Steven Spielberg comes up to you, do you still get, I know this sounds weird, it's not gross, but like, do you get butterflies or something? Like, "Oh, there's Steven." Like, it's exciting, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I mean, he was certainly my boss, but he didn't intimidate me or anything. And Steven was always really very patient with me and very nice to me. And I tell the story that I think the reason for that, not that Steven was never mean to anybody, but he, for some reason, thought that I was going to go into the ministry, but decided to work for him instead. So he told everybody that. And I think that's why he never wanted to yell at me.
You picked him over God.
Yeah, so it kind of put me at ease a little bit. I enjoyed the time with him tremendously. You know, I saw him several years later after I left Amblin, and he was so nice. We talked for about 5 minutes. He was on his way to a Saving Private Ryan cast reunion, and couldn't really talk for long. But he was so nice. So he's just a really good person. I guess it's only I can describe.
It's amazing because his output is there's no equal as far as the amount of projects that he either produced or specifically directed. That, I mean, his direction is just, obviously, it's amazing. One of my favorite stats in all of movie history is Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. Like, back to back, like commercial and artistic, like the heights are incredible. And he did all of this at Universal. And the quick story is his story is he snuck on past Scotty over at the gate at Universal
Yeah.
and started watching people shooting movies at Universal, ended up directing night galleries, ended up working on TV, which ended up on Duel, which ended up for Jaws. And he became kind of like Sid Sheinberg's golden director, which, of course, I mean, and Lou Wasserman. And so for him to be coming back to Universal, they built him this gorgeous facility, which is what you're talking about moving him into. Explain a little bit, just so people get the idea. And then I want to hear what you did there and what kind of movies you guys made there.
Well, I think that Steven, above all, understood that when you make a movie, you're immersed in it. I mean, everybody who works on it is so dedicated to that project. Well, we had 5 projects the first year, and
Wow.
I think Steven kind of had it in his vision to do multiple movies as producer, director, things like that. And so he made Amblin like the home away from home. It was so very comfortable. It had a full kitchen with a chef, had a game room with 6 upright video games, and overstuffed couches with fireplace, and had a gym. There were 2. There was an outdoor jacuzzi, and a room called the Cave, which had 2 hot tubs, one for Steve and Kathy Frank, and one for all of us. And we had a waterfall, had a steam room. It was one of those places you never wanted to leave.
It's like the PG or G version of the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah, exactly. And except in place of girls, there was a candy concession stand in the theater.
Right.
So there were plenty of orgies. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But anyway, it was really such a comfortable place. And so when you were under pressure during productions and preparation, you didn't really feel it as much because you were like working from home. So
there's a lot of in Hollywood. There's a lot of times where you'll have what's his name, Joel, not Schumacher, the big producer over at Warner Brothers, Joel Silver. Joel Silver was famous for being a screamer and just having a super big anger issue. Spielberg and all these people didn't seem to be like that. You can still have lots of pressure, but what was the attitude and the vibe at Amblin?
Well, Steven was at that time. Movies were his life. He in Time magazine article on him. He said, "I dream for a living," and our job was to keep taking care of his real life so that he could dream. And then Kathy Kennedy and Frank Marshall ran the day-to-day operations and then produced the films. And Kathy was very creative, on the ball, a little intense, but she had a great sense of humor. Frank was so laid back, and it was amazing. He got so much done, but he was very casual. The rest
were they married at this point, or were they not married?
No, they weren't married yet.
Okay.
I think they got married after I left.
Okay.
But it was,
why were you keeping them apart, Mark?
It was a secret plan, but ultimately it failed. No, it was just a really, everybody loved working together. It was, we would get together, after hours, and what's amazing is that we all set this rule that we would never talk about Amblin outside of work. But inevitably, the conversations always veered toward Amblin, and that's all we talked about. It was such a huge part of our lives. And
what were the movies you were making at this place that was, because I know kind of some of them, but like this first year, what movies were you making there?
Well, when I joined in '84, Steven was in post-production on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. he also Amblin also made Kevin Reynolds' directorial debut, Fandango, which I think is a really underrated film. And
Kevin Costner was in that one, right? That's
yes,
where they met and became
yeah,
friends.
and he didn't play a dead body either. But and then Gremlins came out in, I think, May or June of that year. But we were already in prep on, well, no, it was later on, Back to the Future, Goonies, Young Sherlock Holmes, The Money Pit, and Color Purple. So, 28 people on
Murderer's
staff.
Row. That's amazing.
Yeah, there were 5 films the first full year that I was there. It was amazing. But we still had time, found time to enjoy our time there. We would relax in the evenings, around the jacuzzi and around the fire pit. And it was it just didn't seem like work. I was up when we were doing Goonies. The final script came in, and I ended up doing the Xeroxing, the security stamping, and delivering. And I was up for a full 24 hours, and it didn't even faze me because I loved it so much. And by the way, a friend of mine, Sebastian Schwartz, is fascinated by the fact that Stephen and Kathy's office had a Murphy bed. So if they ever wanted to stay over, they could. Now, they never used it, but we did. I think Frank had a fold out on his couch. So, we spent a lot of time there.
I want to get to Goonies because obviously there's so many great stories there. But just before we leave this era, again, I don't even know if you can in your head, but from that point of view, that group of movies, everyone has opinions. Right? Like when we were doing JAG, they did the NCIS spinoff. And I thought it was kind of rough. And I was like in my head going, I don't know if this thing is going to go, because that was my opinion of it. 22 years later, I was wrong. What was your opinion in that group of films of like, oh, this one's going to be a big hit. This one I don't know about. Did you have thoughts on those films?
Well, at the time, it was the 2 main films were Goonies and Back to the Future, because they came out 1 month apart. And I remember making a bet with one of the PAs on Back to the Future saying, Goonies is going to be huge. It's going to do $300 million, and Back to the Future might make 100, and and will be remembered. And it was just the opposite. I mean, Back to the Future ended up making 300 million. Goonies made less than 100 million. I think it made somewhere between 60 and 70 million. And, but, retrospectively, look, both have become beloved, but Goonies is the one that seems to have this longevity because it connects parents and children, who pass it down. And, so I'm really proud of that. Even though I had very little to do with it. It was just,
well, again, I'm going to argue with you on that. And let's get to Goonies now. So you're working at Amblin, and you find your way up to Astoria where they're shooting this on a break. So like you said, you're working every day at Amblin, and then when you get a vacation, what do? You go to an Amblin production to hang out on the set.
Well, the thing is, on More American Graffiti, they were shooting up in Central California, Northern California. So I never had a chance to visit the set, and I was really far removed from the action. And on Goonies, once they left LA and went to Astoria, it got really kind of quiet, and I really wanted to visit a production where I felt like I belonged, that I wasn't going to get kicked off. And
well,
so
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got to know. If that in that same time though, they were shooting Back to the Future right there on the lot, like a block and a half from where Amblin was, right? Or was it because Bob and Bob were just so overwhelmed that you didn't want to?
They started. I think they started shooting Back to the Future in November of of '84, and this was October, the third week in October. So so I asked Steven if I could go up and visit the set. And he said, well, it's fine with me, but get Dick Donner's blessing. So I called Dick's office, production office up there, and talked to Jenny Lou Tugin, who was his executive assistant at the time, and gave my request. And she said, well, let me find out. And later that afternoon, Dick's personal assistant, Michael Thaw, called me and said, Dick wants to know if you're still coming up. And his tone was kind of weird. So I said, well, is there a problem? And he said, well, yeah, there's a problem. He said, Dick said, if you're crazy enough to want to come up here, he's paying for your flight. And
oh, wow.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah. That was just the beginning of Dick's legendary generosity. He was a very unique human being. And
explain Dick Donner to people that don't know. I mean, the guy is a legend, but
yeah, Dick was larger than life. I'd like to say that his heart was as big as his voice, which you could hear clear across the Warner Brothers lot. He was gregarious. He was the life of the party. The crews on his films would hold off, on any other offers if there was a chance that he was going to go into production, because they wanted to work with him so bad. And Dick treated his crews, he joked with them. He played practical jokes on them. He appreciated them. And there just aren't that many filmmakers in Hollywood that put, people before projects. And right. Dick was one of those who valued everyone. And, the guy did Superman and right. The Omen and the Lethal Weapon films and Lady Hawk, and he never changed who he was. He was passionate about causes. He loved animals. I can't even scratch the surface of what he was like. And if I get too far into it, I think I'll start crying, because he was such a special man to me.
So this special man flies you up to Northern California in this small town where they're shooting the movie. And how was your experience? What happened?
Well, the second day I was up there, he put me to work. He put me to work on second unit. And so I was a PA on the second unit, and ended up staying up there for the entire 3 weeks. And in fact, Steven came up to do second unit, and I didn't even work with Steven. I worked for Donner. And I guess Steven gave his blessing, because, otherwise I would have been called back to LA.
So second unit, just in case you don't know, second unit is your main company unit is shooting the movie. And then there are other shots that they're important to the film. They need to be shot, but maybe you don't need the main director. So you get a very talented person to run second unit to shoot certain things that will then be added. Like you mentioned one of the scenes that was shot, which I remember, with Carrie Green. What was that shot and setup that you guys were doing? It was you and Frank, right?
My chair here for a second. There we go.
Yeah.
Carrie. It was the beginning of the film when the police are chasing the Fratellis, and all the kids miss the chase, just barely. Carrie was doing the victory pyramid, and it was all shot with no sound. But I was a PA on that. Frank Marshall directed that part of it. I did stuff out at Ecola State Park, which Troy grabbing Brand's hand and on the little kid's bike and sending him over the cliff. Things like that.
Just try to recenter yourself. Sorry. Perfect. Okay, great. So all of these little bits that you were shooting go into the movie. And at some point you said you were driving a car that didn't make it in the movie. You were a stuntman in one of the shots.
Yeah. It was the end of a shooting day, and we were losing the light, and Dick said, I want to get this shot of Data being pulled into the trash can. And so he looked at me and said, hey, kid, get in the car and drive. Well, these were stunt drivers, one in front of me, one in back of me. And I guess one of the stunt guys had gone home or something. So he put me in the car and said, start driving. Well, we couldn't use the windshield wipers, but the car in front of me was throwing mud and rocks into my windshield. And all I could see was me running into the camera crew and killing people and you know, my face all over the news. And but it, you know, it was strangely empowering because Dick was one of those people who, if he thought you could do something, he would throw you in the deep end, and you would either do it or not do it. And you know, at the end of it, he said, "Good job, kid." Unfortunately, they lost the light and ended up reshooting the scene with Data, with Ke Huy Quan on the back lot at Warner Brothers. So you've got all this overcast and mist, and then Key's scene was bright and sunshine. You know, it was it was a little discrepancy. But anyway, it was such a great experience, and like I said, it just kind of made me feel like, okay, I can do this. You know, if I'm asked to do something, I can do it.
So you're up there and Dick Donner's embraced you. You're part of the production. How do you become the Goonie Wrangler? And when did you meet all these kids?
Well, that happened once we got back to L.A. Because Dick asked Steven to direct second unit because he knew that there was going to be entire scenes or major shots with the cast that, you know, there just wasn't enough time. Because as you know, when you have 7 kids, they can only work a certain number of hours a day. They have to be in school. Mm-hmm. They were in every shot, just about. And so Dick needed someone who could shoot what needed to be shot and kind of follow Dick's lead. And Steven said, "I'm your guy." And because I've directed before. And so, he did that. And so we were, you know, I was with Steven daily on stage 15, shooting the wishing well in the organ chamber and the water slide, while Dick was on stage 16 shooting the pirate ship stuff. And we would trade cast, you know, back and forth. And Steven one day, Sean said he would go off, you know. I mean, and the thing is, I don't blame them. Across the little alleyway on one of the adjoining sound stages, Pee Wee Herman was shooting Pee Wee's Big Adventure, his first film, and so the kids were like magnets. They would go over there and watch the shooting. And Steven said, "I want you to know where those kids are at all times," and which was easier said than done, but you know, it's an order. So that's what I did, and I that's how I became known as the Goonie Wrangler. And I, you know, I mean, they still gave me the slip once in a while, especially when Sean would have sugar. But it was, but listen, I was close enough in age. I think I was 23, so I was close enough in age to Josh and Carrie, and you know, and the other kids were professionals, so they at least tolerated me, if not respect me.
Now, had Indy 3 happened, or was this the first time they discovered Ke?
No, that was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom had come out.
Oh, right. Okay, so he had worked with him.
Yeah. In fact, I did. Steven had me, because it was Ke's first experience in a motion picture, and he was still kind of new to L.A., he had me chaperone Ke to all his publicity interviews, things like that. And so I got to know Ke that way. And so by the time Goonies was cast, Ke already knew me well. And then there, as far as Sean goes, he likes to tell this story, which I get hissed at a lot. But Sean came to audition for Mikey, and it was the end of a day, and he was the last one. And so I was running camera for the casting session, and Steven said, "Okay, go get Sean." So I go out to the lobby and said, "We're ready for you." And we're walking back to the conference room where we were doing the auditions. And Sean was shaking. And I said, "You look a little nervous." And he said, I am. And I don't know why I said this. I was trying to put him at ease. But I said, well, there's nothing to be nervous about. You're just about to meet the most powerful director in the world. And I opened the door to the conference room. And Sean introduced himself about 40 times. and he didn't make it through the first take of the audition. These were sides that were written by Chris Columbus that didn't appear in the film, so he had memorized this stuff, and he said, "Damn," and I said, "Oh, you know what? I had a problem with the camera." And Dick said, "Good, you can do it again."
Dug up all the rich stuff because we were too chicken to go for it. Sorry.
I really screwed up on the camera.
Good. That gives me a chance to do it again.
That's my fault.
And Sean did it again, and
you didn't have a problem with the camera though. That was the whole thing, right? Is that you were trying to read the room? Yeah.
Well, I was trying to make it up to Sean, but anyway, it was he had the part before he even left the room, but they called him later and told him he had the part, but he really charmed him. So that's how I knew Sean. And then when Sean was doing his little short films as a kid, I would help him with those, and then Carrie became like a younger sister, and Josh was Josh, and Corey, I used to I actually chaperoned he and Drew Barrymore on a date one time.
You remember our first date?
No, tell me.
Sherman Oaks Galleria.
At the Galleria. Oh, what a classic. The Galleria is the Galleria from Fast Times, if you want a visual. Yeah. And they had a movie theater there, which a friend of mine worked there. So you're chaperoning these two major stars on a date. He had worked now Corey had done Gremlins, right? So was that before? So they had Gremlins, and like he was from Empire or from Temple of Doom, and so the new kids. And so when Key won his Academy Award, how did you feel about that?
That was so emotional because he, actually back in 2017, Key and another friend and I formed a production company. Key had this idea to make films in China, but using American talent and knowledge, because the Chinese at the time were making movies, but they really didn't know how to structure a story or things like that. And Key saw a great opportunity, and while it didn't work out, I knew his heart was in acting. It wasn't producing, although he would have made a great producer. And so when he, in fact, it was before the pandemic, we all got together at Jeff Cohen's sister's house for Easter. I think it was either Easter or Thanksgiving. And Key said, I got this audition for a movie as an actor, and we were so happy for him, and he was, he was excited, and then it turned out to be Everything Everywhere All at Once. And when he started winning those awards, his emotion got our emotions going, and he is so genuine. He is exactly who you see. That's Key all the time. He's got a high energy. He's got a great heart. He's infectious in his enthusiasm, and he's genuine. So we were so happy for him. And then when he won, the Academy Award, gosh, man, we were all texting him that night and just congratulating him. I'm so proud of him.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've never met Key. I know Corey and a couple of the other kids, but the Indiana, the meeting Harrison backstage story just still tears me up.
Yeah.
You just care about these people when, especially when you meet them as kids and you're actually there with them as kids. And it's a weird situation. I have the same type of, some of the stories from Little House where we were all kids, or some of the young actors that we worked together, and then you grow up and life becomes a little bit different. But man, what a great group of kids. And then you've got Josh, who is like this huge star. Yeah. Jeff became a lawyer, right? He's like an entertainment lawyer.
Yeah, and he represents Key.
That's right. He was mentioning that in the Academy Awards speech. I mean, this is a real big touchstone movie. And so you guys do this movie. You're a big part of it. And this was kind of, at least in the book you're explaining, and I recognize it as well. When you're spending in production, when you're spending 12 hours on a good day out of every day with the same people, it's hard not to become a real tight-knit group, good or bad, for good, for bad. For the most part, it's always good. And so when the production is over, you have this, everyone refers to it as like, oh, they're like my family because you spend so much time with them. And you said this was kind of like your first experience like that. You want to talk about that and how you felt?
I mean, and it still is. I mean, the family is as strong as it used to be. I mean, we celebrated birthdays. We went to funerals. Corey's drug bust and his rehabilitation. We were invested in, but Donner's the one who not only paid for the treatment, but also gave him opportunities. And so you go through the same things that families go through. And you're proud of their accomplishments. I mean, the way the kids have turned out, as you know, I mean, Corey, even who had the roughest childhood of any of them, has always tried to do the right thing, and has he's an honorable man. He's a good friend, and I'm proud of every one of those kids. And then the adults, every holiday, Jeff Cohen's mom, Elaine, would have those of us who couldn't go home for the holidays, would have us over for dinners and things like that. And Annie Ramsey and her husband Logan would always come over, and Annie was I just I loved Annie so much.
I had the opportunity to meet Annie because she was in Deadly Friend with my brother Matt, and it was like she and Logan were extremely sweet.
Oh yeah, and even after after Annie had her the surgery on her tongue for her throat cancer, she was talking like she did in Mama at the gatherings, but she was Annie, and she would insist on giving you a kiss on the lips, but she was drooling a little bit, but she was just the sweetest person, and I miss her, I think, the most, along with Darn too. But anyway, it's the family you choose,
right.
And as much as I love the family I was born into, the family you choose is special in its own way.
Well, there's so much more intent. Obviously you love your family because this is what the cards you've been dealt, but it's the cards that you decide to play with. And, like you say, it's been so, Sean alone, I mean, then his huge, success with Lord of the Rings and all of that experience, and your experiences, they all combine to these different, it builds upon, one another. You look back at this type of movie, that Goonies being a touchstone, and they've just announced a sequel, or at least doing a sequel. Thoughts? I will give you mine afterwards, but what are your thoughts?
I don't know. Why would you make a sequel to E.T.? When you have a unique film like Goonies, and by the way, you couldn't make Goonies today, the original, because it was a more innocent time, and kids were willing to go on on an adventure like that. I think kids are so cynical today, and they have so many distractions that I don't know if they would get on board an adventure like that. So I'm kind of the mind that we made a classic and leave it alone, because you can't recreate the magic. If anyone could, it'd be Steven. But then Dick Donner, who was the heart of it, isn't there anymore. So
Yeah.
I just think it becomes something to fill a streaming slot or a Saturday afternoon kiddie showing. I mean, I don't know. I just don't. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I really, I'm really not crazy about it.
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. But we also teach kids. We have a great class called the Youth Weekly class that's every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. And it's for kids. It's for like 10 to 17. And we have a great group of kids right now, and it is ongoing. So if you know someone that wants to get into acting and has never done any acting but would love to try, why don't you have them try starting off with Youth Weekly? Just go to workingactorsschool.com and check us out. It's Youth Weekly every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Act 3, present day.
One of my favorite scenes in Goonies is the scene where we meet the kids, where they do the truffle shuffle and he comes in and they're all talking, and all of the cross talking and where Corey is trying to translate the Spanish stuff and telling the mom that, you know, this is where you hide the drugs, and all of these different things that is a combination. You could see a bit of it with Steven in E.T., where kids are talking over each other, but Dick Donner did it in Lethal Weapon. It's a directing thing where it's the interplay of the characters. And throughout the movie, actually, that whole over-talking thing it's a decision that has to be made. You know, as a production person, it's a decision that has to be made in production because there's all these issues for editing and sound, and you can't step on his line. But if it's in the movie, they figured it out, and that's why I don't see it that often, and it's one of my favorite things about the movie is that kids talk over each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and those were 7 unique individuals.
Right.
And the Fratellis are also completely identifiable. So if you don't have Mama Fratelli anymore, and the kids are all grown up, you can't replace them because you can't match those performances. And plus, I think the first thing that the people who grew up with the film are going to say is they're old. You know,
they are.
They're not cute anymore. I mean, they're good looking people, but they're not cute. And you know, I don't know. The Fratellis are going to be in wheelchairs. I mean, what's the reason to make it? And I think there was a reason that it wasn't made for 40 years. You know, there wasn't a sequel because they couldn't do it.
I did a movie called Summer School with Mark Harmon, and
I did your set with you.
What's that?
I visited the set out in Woodland Hills.
That's right, over at John Hughes Junior High or whatever, Hughes Junior High. And I don't feel it's on par with the Goonies as far as like, I don't know, the magical, the fun, the adventure. But it has its own charms, which are so unique that they've tried to remake it. Adam Sandler tried to remake it. When you try to remake something from the past, if you don't understand why you're remaking it and what it was that made it successful, you're bound to failure. And if you're trying to do that reboot, restart thing where you've got some of the old cast and some of the new cast, it just, I think Tom Cruise did the best with Top Gun because he's Tom Cruise and he literally is playing the same character, dealing with the fact that he's, his age, but look at him at his age. It's so different when you're dealing with, like you said, Sean is not going to be putting braces back on and being Mikey looking for the rich stuff.
Yeah,
so
Taylor,
Yeah, exactly. So it's anyway. So okay, so such a big part of your life is spent there, and you've got. When we later started hanging out, you had this job, and you can say to keep this or not in the interview. You had this job where you were transferring like VHS tapes or videotapes that had been done for Steven or George to like kind of archive them. And you showed me this tape that you talk about in the book that you did in Hawaii. What was the whole Hawaii prank that happened with the Goonies?
Yeah, that became legendary. The last couple of weeks of production, Jeff Cohen showed up one morning with a suitcase that said Maui or bust. Now, Dick had a beach house in Maui, and after 4 months with the kids, was counting the days till he could get away from everyone and go relax on the beach. And so, but Dick thought it was funny and told Jeff to go show Spielberg. So Jeff went over to stage 15 and showed him, and Steven said, "Wait, I got an idea." So he called me over and said, "I want you to arrange for all the kids and a parent or guardian, the 2 teachers, on-set tutors, and the Fratellis to go to Maui, and we'll get Dick out of the house and move in." And so, but he said the caveat was, if Dick finds out from any of you that it's happening, the trip's off. And so the kids were so terrified of giving it away that they avoided Dick unless they had to be on set with him. And Dick started thinking, well, he thought the kids were fond of him, but he thought, well, maybe they're just actors and not what I thought they were. And so Dick was kind of hurt, but he kept going on. And when they called wrap on main unit I think it was February 16th, he was on a plane to Maui in less than a half an hour. And we had the wrap party without him. Well, we had to shoot a couple of extra days on second unit. So that next Wednesday, we flew to Maui. And Dick's housekeeper got him out of the house under the pretense that she needed help with shopping. And we arrived by a charter bus, and the kids opened their suitcases, threw clothes all over the place, newspapers, everything. So it was trashed. And Dick came around the corner of the house. I think it was slightly buzzed. And he said, "What the F is this?" And the kids went, "Oh, hi, Dick." Like he wasn't even there. And Dick went into shock. And he sat down and he kept rocking back and forth going, "Oh my God, oh my God." And the kids all swarmed around him and loved on him. And I got it all on videotape. But Steven said, I want to be able to see it. And then he noticed something out by the beach and started heading out that way. And then the Fratellis come up, and they're all over each other like they were at the end of the movie. And Dick, his legs went out from under him, and he sank to his knees and had that big laugh of his that just went on and on. And finally, when he collected his senses, he told me to call Steven and tell him they were bringing Donner home on an air ambulance. But he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And that night, we had a barbecue, and Dick's next door neighbor, Alice Cooper, came over, and the kids were just amazed. And
wow.
We just had a great time. And so it was kind of the wrap party with Dick that we didn't get a chance to have in LA. And it made the trades and everything. And I finally, after years, put it on, at least a section of it on YouTube. And I actually shared it with the fans in Facebook groups, the Goonies Facebook groups. And I think somebody posted it on YouTube. But it was just one of those things that had a depth to it, that showed another side to the kids and to Dick, and it's a great fond memory for me.
I bet. I mean, it sounds like an amazing, obviously, prank, and to be in the middle of all the players and everything. It's also pretty impressive. Again, like getting an edict from Steven, do this, and then you're booking passage and travel arrangements with no internet back in the day for 30 people more.
Yeah, thank God for Hoffman travel. So they made it possible.
In Steven's bank account.
Yeah. Well, and Steven gave me $5,000 in cash, and said,
Wow.
treat the kids and the adults to whatever they want. And so, I arranged a couple things like a luau, and we did a catamaran ride at sunset, and the adults went out to dinners and things like that. And it was just, we actually, the day of the barbecue, I said, we need to fill Dick's freezer and refrigerator, so he's not out or anything. So Joey Pantoliano and Robert Davi and I went to a local grocery store.
The Fratellis.
Yeah, spent $500 on groceries, but those were 1985 prices. But I would go down an aisle, and Joey would have opened a bag of potato chips, taken a couple of chips out, and put it back on the thing. So I had to buy that, and then another aisle, Robert was eating cookies and putting it back, and so we ended up spending a lot of money. But it was just one of those things out of our love for Donner, that we wanted him to be able to not worry about anything. Well, even though he could afford it, certainly. But
still, I mean, come on, you break into his house and you take over his kitchen, and I know kids can eat everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously this is a huge part of your career, but just one small part of it. You worked on all these Amblin projects. There's The Money Pit, Amazing Stories, The Color Purple, Indy 3, and then Tales from the Crypt, Radio Flyer. These are Donner type of productions. Lethal Weapon, Free Willy. You worked with Billy Crystal in 61 Asterix, and then you ended up on Harry Potter. I'm gonna have you back, because I can't. We could talk about each one of these movies for a whole podcast. Out of all of those experiences, what was, besides this kind of moment with the Goonies, what would you say is your most life affecting in those remaining? And I've just listed off a couple of them. Of course, you've had a whole other career, and you've made movies. So what would you say would be the next biggest type of experience for you?
Well, I recently executive produced a film for an Australian director,
Okay.
based on a personal experience of him losing his mom, and it's a very affecting movie called Ancestry Road that's coming out this year. And I was really honored to do that. It for some reason, it seems my name, people feel can get noticed. So I don't know. I can take issue with that, but if I can help, then I love doing it. I'm also doing actually consulting on a Goonies documentary called Life After Goonies, which will be out at the end of this year too. And I'll be appearing at a Goonies 40th anniversary. So I guess all that to say, I think Goonies is still the touchstone, is still the movie that has affected my life the most, especially in the relationships that I maintain. And I am so grateful for that, because as you know, I mean, as you get older, it's the memories that take precedent in your life, and I have the happiest memories with those group of people. Even though with Free Willy was a great experience as a producer and things, it's just I go back to that earlier experience. It was also my first credit, which Stephen, Kathy, and Frank gave me. Even though Stephen didn't take a credit as second unit director, they gave me second unit production office assistant because they felt that my name should be on there, which blew me away. And actually, my secret goal was to have my name on a film before my 10-year high school reunion, which I beat by 3 weeks.
Perfect. And also, I just curiously, obviously George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Richard Donner. There's a lot of Richard Donner towards the end, not the end, but like in the second half of your credits here. Is he as big a part of your experience as it looks like?
Oh yeah. Dick was a huge part of my life, not just because of the gentleman that he was, but just the opportunities that he gave me. Like I said, if Dick felt you could do something, he would throw you in, and you would have to prove yourself. And he had no problem doing that with people that he trusted. So to have his trust and was, meant the world to me. And our last, we had a company reunion lunch back in 2018 while Dick was still alive. And he, for him to say, "I love you, kid," meant more than anything.
That means a lot. I get that. Now, were you there when he met Lauren and all of that? Is it the whole big...
Yeah, it was, he had worked on Lady Hawk before he started Goonies. And then later on, when I was running films for Donner at his house at night while I was working for an Amblin during the day, I got to see their relationship develop. And so that was such a great memory, because Dick, had so much love to give, and was a confirmed bachelor until he met Lauren. But he also, by the way,
that's Lauren Schuler, who also is the producer of the X-Men.
Yeah,
and
Pretty in Pink,
is a
and
huge
X-Men.
career, completely separate from Dick.
Mr. Mom. So, but Dick dated Liv Ullmann back in the early days.
Wow.
He had, his book is I can't remember the name of it now, but it's called "You're
Something
the
I Can Believe You Can Fly. Oh, yeah.
So and that he tells Dick's early life and stuff. So
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey there, my name is Patrick Labyorteaux, and I play an actor on TV. And I also have this acting school called Working Actors School. And what we do there is we teach people to act using Zoom. So you can take an acting class with me and with a person in Connecticut, in Florida, and San Diego all at the same time, thanks to the miracle of Zoom. Now, besides classes, I also offer a one-on-one session. It's an hour just between you and me working on a particular piece of material, whether it's for an upcoming audition or maybe you're working on something and you need to have that breakthrough moment. These are really, really fun, and they're really, really great because they're really personalized and intense in all the good ways that intense can be. So if you're working on something, if you want to break through, if you want to have a one-on-one session where you're not working with other people, this is the way to do it. All the information is in the classes page on workingactorsschool.com.
Act 4. Questions.
We're here at the questions, where I'm going to ask you a series of questions that I ask everybody. And just to clarify, this is kind of interesting. I haven't explained this before. The questions, many of them, like all of them, come from my wife, Tina. And so we're going to relabel this section, Tina's Got to Know. And here are the questions. Here are the questions that Tina's got to know. Okay. So first question is, that's showbiz. What is the most Hollywood moment in your life?
Gosh, man. I don't know if this would qualify. Well, I guess it would qualify as a Hollywood moment, but it's one of the stories in the book where Steven was directing one of the Amazing Stories episodes, and the set was filled up with the chemical fog that you use to when you're shooting atmospheric stuff, and so we took a break, and Steven was on stage 28 at Universal, which was the Phantom of the Opera stage. But he took a break and went out and was leaning against the wall of a soundstage that was used for special effects demonstrations, which actually had two of his effects, E.T. and 1941. And so I was kind of keeping my distance. I always would keep an eye on him, but in case he needed me, but I didn't want to intrude. And so he was resting his face to the sun, and I watched this lady on the Universal tour, the tram midpoint. She jumped off the tram and she ran up to Steven with her camera and raised her camera, and Steven kind of opened one eye and saw her, and so he smiled, and she didn't take the picture. And finally she got a little bit rude and said, "Excuse me, would you step aside, please?" And Steven said, "Well, sure." And he stepped aside, and she took a picture of an E.T. poster and ran and got back on the tram, and the tram took off. And he looked at me and shrugged his shoulders, and I shrugged mine, and we went back to work. And I thought that, how often does that happen with someone,
That's a great story. I love that story. She had no idea she was shushing the director of ETOA.
No.
All right. Number 2, that's Showbiz. Part 2.
Okay.
What is the most embarrassing Hollywood moment in your life?
Oh, man, that's easy. Also in the book, George decided to allow Fox to distribute Empire Strikes Back. And, George didn't have a good experience on Star Wars with the studio, save for Alan Ladd.
Right.
So he debated whether or not he was going to let the studio distribute the film. Finally decided to do it, and I was given a letter to the chairman of the board, Dennis Stanfield, and told to deliver it only to him. So, of course, do what I'm told. So I drive to Fox. I get it, get on the lot. I go to his office. It's around lunchtime, I think. And so I go into his office, and the outer office is dark, where his assistant's supposed to be. And so I said, hello, and heard this voice from the inner room saying, yes. And I go to the door and I open it up, and it's Dennis Stanfield's office. And he's at the end of this huge room. It reminds me of when the characters of the Wizard of Oz are walking that hallway at the Wizard's Palace. It just takes forever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm walking, and it's getting longer and longer. And I finally go up to him, and I, by the way, before that, I was so nervous that I went in and I used the restroom before I, went in to give him the letter, and washed my hands. Anyway, go in, and I said, I have a letter from George Lucas for you, sir. And he looks at me kind of funny, up and down, and says, thank you. I said, oh, you're welcome. And I walk out of his office, and I walk out into the hallway, and I thought, now what was he looking at? And I looked down, and not only is my fly open, but my shirt tail is pulled through my khaki. And I could see my own death. I thought, I won't even get out of the building before I'm fired.
So this $1 billion deal you delivered with a shirt tail coming out of your open zipper.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine Dennis Stanfield calling Jordan saying, the deal's off, and tell your runner to zip up. I thought, boy, I'm a really great representative of this, $1 billion company.
That's really funny. Okay, so moving on about money, show me the money. Now, what is your biggest missed financial opportunity? There are lots of opportunities in this town because you hear of people doing deals. In fact, I will tell you this quick story. A friend of mine by the name of David Kriegel was in a movie that Frank and Kathy did called Survive, was it? In the Andes or whatever?
Oh, Alive.
And Alive. He was one of the soccer players or whatever. He was an actor. And he kept getting turned on to like stock tips from Frank and Kathy, who were, investing in different things because they're Frank and Kathy. Wasn't like he made a ton of money or anything, but it's like in this world, you're around all of these type of people that are movers and shakers. So what would your biggest missed financial opportunity be?
When I was working at Lucasfilm, George was very generous, and he actually gave the staff a percentage of the gross of Empire, based on how long you had been there and all. So I think I got 1/200th of 1%, and it was $5,000, and I was making $125 a week. Wow. So I thought, I bought ski equipment, I bought a bunch of stuff, and if I had stayed on, and if I hadn't screwed up so badly, then, that percentage would have accrued, and I probably would have made hundreds of thousands. But I had to go and get myself fired. So, yeah.
Well, okay. If you read the book, the story that you tell, which I believe completely, I think it was a rash firing. I don't believe it was a mistake. I think someone stole the breastplate, or someone, in customs was like, "Oh, this is cool. I'll take this home to my kid." I don't think it was your fault. And again, the guy apologized, but still, that's a great. I mean, that's a huge missed opportunity.
Yeah, I know.
All right, number 4, show and tell. As a teenager, what was your favorite poster in your room, and how did you come to obtain it?
I had a big poster of Laurel and Hardy. I was a huge fan of Laurel and Hardy, and there was a record store in town that was one of those record stores that had burning incense all the time, so with flower power,
blacklight posters.
Yeah, exactly. And I bought it there, and that was, my friends had Farrah Fawcett. I had Laurel and Hardy.
So Laurel and Hardy poster, and then you end up your first job in Hollywood working with.
Yeah.
How was that like a huge thing at that moment for you then?
I didn't connect it at the time. It wasn't until I was writing the book and remembered that he had worked for Laurel and Hardy, for Hal Roach, that I thought, wow, and I still have the poster, by the way. Not on my wall, but I have it in my I have it in a tube.
Yeah, I still have my Farrah Fawcett poster, and it's still on the wall.
I was a late developer.
Number 5, showdown. Or no, number 4. Number 5, showdown. What is the best thing you've ever done / worst thing you've ever done professionally? What's the best thing you've ever done professionally and the worst thing you've ever done professionally?
Movie-wise? I mean, just strictly movie-wise?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, I mean, it could be TV. It doesn't matter. But professionally, like thing you're most proud of, thing you're least proud of.
Well, Free Willy was my first chance at being a producer. I was associate producer on the first one and the second one as well. And then I moved to co-producer on the third one. And I think that experience was such a leap forward for me, and gave me more confidence. And so like I said, as much as I love Goonies, Free Willy was a very satisfying experience, and also one that just gave me the confidence professionally. So I'd say that was probably my best one. My worst one, I did this. I was a post-production supervisor on this picture called New York Minute. It was the Olsen twins' first feature, and it started out. It was going to be their introduction into more adult movies, with more adult jokes, things like that. And it ended up being aimed at 6-year-olds. And it just, there were certain things that happened during the time that just kind of ruined it for me. And I lost a couple of friends because of it too.
That sucks.
Yeah, it was a political situation with the director that I wasn't willing to go along with, because it wouldn't have protected Warner Brothers or the editor, and so it's not one that I have real fond memories of, or that I have on my resume, even though it is on my resume. It just Well,
hey, you can't get highs and lows of this industry are real. They're real highs and lows.
Oh yeah, and I've had more highs than lows, believe me.
This one is mainly for an actor, but I think it could also be asked for you, which is no show. The question usually is, what part did you want but didn't get? But I can frame it for you, like, what project did you want to work on but weren't able to?
I was offered, one of the producers offered me the post-production supervisor job on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets as well. But at that point, it was right after 9/11. And it would have meant being away from home for another year. And I just wasn't ready for that. And they ended up going eventually all British, crew anyway. So, I think about that sometimes, but I feel I made the right decision.
You always seem to be, I mean, what I like about your choices and the way that you make choices is based on your heart, because when it comes down to it, and we've talked about this a couple of times, you're spending your life on a set in an office, and a lot of times in post-production and in production, whether it's pre or post, there is no glamour. It's some weird room that smells like pastrami that doesn't have a window. And you're like, when am I getting to go home? And you never see daylight. And it's like, and then the movie comes out and everyone's like, oh, wow, must have been so cool. And it's like, yeah. So it's like, if your heart isn't into it is where I'm heading, then yeah, that being stuck alone away from home and at that special time in a country that isn't yours, I get that choice.
Yeah. And I love the people I worked with, but it wasn't worth it for another year.
All right. So here's a new question. Favorite show? What movie has most influenced you?
Wow.
And let's keep this movies that you didn't work on, like when you were like as a viewer.
Okay. Oh gosh. There's so many. And off the top of my head, I'll tell you one that gets me every time, and it has Sean in it, but it's Rudy. It's such an unabashedly feel-good movie about overcoming, and Sean is so sincere in it that it just it hit me on several levels. And listen, I'm at that age where I cry at the sunset, so I cry at Geico commercials, but Rudy is always guaranteed to bring it out, bring the real emotion out in me.
Classic choice. And this may be the same answer. This one's called Show Me Again. What is the movie you rewatch the most? What's your most rewatchable movie?
Wow. I don't think I can't remember a movie that I've rewatched a lot.
Really?
Well, I'll tell you, there is one, probably a cross between two John Ford movies. One is The Searchers, and the other is How Green Was My Valley, which just it's just such a perfect movie, and it has Maureen O'Hara in it. So how can it not be?
She's kind of good looking.
Yeah, but it always seems fresh to me for some reason, and I love that. Those old classic movies, nothing beats them.
Yeah, and The Searchers is not like a feel good. It's a dark, but it's beautiful movie.
Yeah, the payoff is so good, and the journey is what's worth taking. And you kind of find something new about Ethan. It seems like every time I watch it, I learn something new.
Being a fanboy of Spielberg and Lucas, I know that's a big movie for them, and John Ford's a big. Did you ever screen that for Steven or any of the guys that you worked with?
I don't think I did The Searchers. I did You Only Live Twice.
That's cool.
Yeah, which isn't the same, of course, but I think that was for set design.
Which, by the way, you also had an encounter with the great John Barry when you went to London, who wasn't he also the production designer for a lot of the Bond movies?
Yes. And then Ken Adam was also, I think John may have done some of the later stuff.
Okay.
Ken Adam did, I can't remember when they crossed over, but yes, John Barry, and also Superman, as well.
Yeah. Like I said, we could do 40 more hours with you, sir. Okay.
Well, and, by the way, I want to rephrase, the movie I rewatched the most is Superman.
That's a great movie. People, I mean, the the type of movie that is, if you now we talk about superhero movies, which interestingly enough, Dick Donner does Superman and Lauren does X-Men, and kind of reignites it all kind of. And then, of course, Lauren hires Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige then takes over Marvel. So it all comes from Dick Donner. Let's just
was our
give his
receptionist
credit.
at Donner's for a while.
Kevin was?
Yeah.
Well, there you
And
go.
Jeff Johns was an intern, so
Wow. Okay, final question. This one is show me some love. What's your favorite performance of mine?
oh, that's easy. Olaf Kozlov.
Olaf Kozlov, the NCIS guy. No,
Yeah.
we do not, we talk in Russian. We're not the bad guy. He's good guy. He's good guy.
Because
He's
you did a flawless Russian accent, and
I did a
you were a bad
flawless
guy.
Boris and Natasha.
Yes, squirrel, moose and squirrel.
Moose and Squirrel. So he's
yeah.
referring
Well,
to an
can't you
episode
play
of
a bad guy?
NCIS I did. I play the bad guy, and I get to play a Russian accent. That's really cool, man, that you know that one.
Oh, I loved it.
Epilogue.
Well, Mark, I can't thank you enough. Please tell me the correct title of your book and where we can get it and all of the good stuff, because it is a wonderful read. It reminds me of those moments. Oh, we never even talked about the time that we ended up at see, we're going to have to talk about, I'll have to have you back for a part 2. We really will, because I want to talk about Free Willy and all this good stuff.
Yeah,
But
anytime.
tell us about the book. Please tell us about the book.
It's called Goonies, Droids, and Killer Whales. My observations and anecdotes of my time with Spielberg, Lucas, Donner, and Warner Brothers. And it was a real labor of love, which I did at the request of my godchildren, who said, Uncle Mark, we want something to remember you by when you're gone. So I resisted doing it, put it off, never put off till tomorrow what you could put off indefinitely. And but once I got into it, the memories came flooding back, and it was just a joy to write. Our story's in there with Bob
Right.
Bergen, and so it's available on Amazon right now. And
The link
I
is
hope
right below. You'll be able to find a link directly to the book, and any other links or any other websites you want to promote, let me know.
Well, I appreciate that. The ebook will be out hopefully in the next month or two, and I'm working on an audiobook as well.
Please tell me you're doing the recording and not someone else.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
because
That's
mean-
fantastic.
I
Hearing
could-
someone tell the stories that happened to them, I think, is super important.
well, I don't have a great voice for recording, but it is me, and I just have to find someone to do the forward by Sean. You want to do it?
Oh, I'd love to, but why not have Sean? Sean can talk.
Well, yeah, that's true. I'll ask him.
I got a great
leverage.
story about Sean. It's so funny. Sean, I think I told you this story recently. Sean, I saw at the TCAs, and I have this weird relationship with Sean where I worked with his father as a child, I worked with his mother as an adult, and then we kind of know each other because kids in the business go, oh, hey, I know you. So I run into him. He's doing something for the Mutant Turtle show that he was doing for Nickelodeon or something. And I was doing a show for Nickelodeon, and we were at the the Television Critics Association event. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "We're doing See Dad Run over at Paramount with Scott Baio." And he goes, "Oh, Scott, I know Scott. Scott would always drive me." And he gave some story about how Scott would drive him somewhere. And then we go back that day to like our work over at Paramount for See Dad Run, and there's Sean Astin, like at Paramount. And I go, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "Oh, I came over to say hi to Scott." And I go, "Come on up." So I take him up. Long story longer, we end up in a meeting with one of the directors of the episodes, which happened to be at that time one of the DeLuise kids, not Michael, David DeLuise. So, no, David?
Wow.
God, I'm trying to drop names and none of it's working. So we're in this meeting, and I'm there, Scott's there, the other producers, my wife, who's a producer, Tina, she's there. And in the corner is Sean Astin. And it's like, not that nothing's wrong with that, but like, why is Sean Astin in the director meeting? I'm like, oh, well, Scott probably brought him in. They're probably doing something together. And Sean's a great director. And so it's like, it makes sense. So then we end the meeting, and Scott comes over to me and goes, "Why was Sean Astin in the meeting?" I go, "Well, yeah, I thought you brought him in." He goes, "Well, I thought you brought him in." Apparently, Sean was just hanging out and just following where everybody was walking, ended up in this meeting and couldn't figure out a proper way to excuse himself without it being awkward. So he just sort of stayed in this meeting. It was just hysterical. But I love Sean. He does give a great forward to the book. And really, you can sense the whole experience that you guys had together. And I can see why Goonies bonded so many people together.
Yeah,
thank you for such great stories,
you
man.
You are too.
Well, thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Friendship.
Oh, always. I mean, it's just like what I love about you is your positive outlook and your ability to see the best in this business, which I love. I love this business. And I think you do too.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. Thank you. Please check out his book. It's really, really good. And we will talk with you soon because there's got to be a part 2 for just Free Willy alone. All right.
Well, thanks, Patrick. I look forward to it.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show. Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm really, really glad you're here and checking out the podcast. It is an audio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's a video podcast over on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever you get the video ones. All of my socials are Working Actors School on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. Please check us out. If you want any information about the school, it is at workingactorsschool.com. We've got classes going on all the time. And again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
It's the Patrick Labyorteaux Show. Patrick Labyorteaux. He's the one you gotta know.